Hello and welcome to the Omnex webinar, Integrating AS9145 APQP PPAP with AS9100 and other standards. The presenter for today's webinar is Craig Thompson. Craig Thompson is the GM of Plantech, which is a sister company of Omnex. During the webinar today, if you have any questions for Craig, please enter them in the Q&A box, which is located in the Zoom control panel, and Craig will get to the questions to the best of his ability at the end of the webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and someone from Omnex will contact you with how to access the recording. Please wait for Omnex to contact you to access the recording. All right, Craig, you can take it away.
Thank you, Miles. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon or evening, depending on the case may be, wherever you're at. Appreciate you joining us today. We're going to talk about integrating AS9145, the APQP, the PPAP, with your AS9100 requirements and some ISO. Hopefully this is beneficial and you guys can get some value out of it and things that you may need to go down or do down the road. All right, so just a little bit about me. Miles, I think, gave you a little bit. Like he said, I'm the general manager of Plantech. I've been with Omnex for a few years now. I did 20 plus years as a quality manager and a quality director, mainly in aerospace for some of the bigger companies like Parker Hannifin, Bombardier, Triumph Group, different players like that. I've worked in pretty much every kind of manufacturing environment that there is. Everything from sheet metal to textiles and everything in between. So hopefully I can bring a little bit of insight to things that are coming down the road and things that you need to do. So just a little bit of background about Omnex. It's an international consulting, training, and software company. They were founded back in 1985 and they're based out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. We do a lot of different things within Omnex and Plantech. We do a lot of integrated management systems, combining more than one standard into one system. Generally, it's your QMS, your health and safety, your environmental management systems all into one. With one set of manuals, one set of procedures, one whole set of documentation. We also do a lot of auditing and gap analysis type stuff, as well as other consulting and training activities in Lean, Six Sigma, problem solving, and many others. Like I said, they're headquartered out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. I actually reside in Houston, Texas, where it's fairly sunny and warm most of the time. But we've trained well over 100,000 people in various countries all over the world. We have over 700 professionals that work within Omnex across the globe. And we also employ quite a few of writers of some of the specifications and standards over the years, everything from ISO to QoS, to some of the old QS documents, as well as some of the blue books for SPC, MSA, and FMEAs. Just a little bit about Omnex's group portfolio. We have the Omnex Consulting, is where we do a lot of our implementation and training and things like that. We also have Omnex Training, where we have on-site or virtual training. With the world that we're in today, a lot of our things have switched to the virtual or e-learning platforms until things get back to somewhat normal, hopefully in the future. We also have Omnex Systems, which is mainly our software and things like that. And we also have Omnex Plantech, which is the part that I'm over, with auditing, PPAP services, some supplier development, project management, and then we also offer outsourced and staffing services. This is our enterprise quality solution. It's our big software package that pretty much runs the gamut of everything business and quality related for the most part. And we'll talk a little bit about that towards the end of the presentation, but I just want to make sure I brought it up. This is Some of the things Plan Tech does, like I said, auditing, supplier services, staffing, and then also product and process conformance services. We do have key global offices. You can see on the map. They are all over the globe. We can pretty much do this in training or implementation or any kind of consulting. And I think we're up to like 15 or 16 different languages now. Just a little bit about Omnex services. Like I said, we do gap analysis and diagnostic training and personnel certification. Some of you may or may not have been to some Omnex training classes in the past. Some of you may have even been to some of the classes I've done. We do a lot of implementation and coaching, engineering and design and services, and some software development, auditing, and then product certification. So a lot of you have signed up today for this webinar based on the AS9100 and integrating that with your AS9100 standard. So a little bit about getting ahead of the curve. AS9145 is still fairly new. It's not yet a requirement, a full-on auditable, certifiable requirement. That is coming. Some of the folks I've talked to that are in APQP have said that probably most likely sometime in late 2021, it will most likely become a certifiable requirement. Now, things may change still based on the world that we're in today and how things play out with the pandemic and how things can roll out and how audits can be done, plus having the auditors with the registrars that can audit to it as well. Right? So they're still working all that out. But AS9100 and AS9145 are really the two key documents within the aerospace industry right now. If you can combine these two, which most of the companies are doing, and the whole thing about today is we're going to talk about how easy it is to really combine these two standards together. You're going to probably see that you're already doing a lot as an aerospace supplier. You're already doing a lot of the integration work that's already done. It is designed, AS9100 is really designed to be an overall preventative action tool. AS9145 really adds all of the elements in there about risk identification, controlling that risk and mitigating it as much as possible. So we're going to talk today about how those requirements actually fit directly in from AS9145 directly into AS9100. And we're going to discuss some of the solutions that are out there and some of the different things you can do to help integrate these two standards together. So the whole point really is to try and get ahead of that curve, because like I said, it is coming. So a little bit about AS9100 and where risk-based thinking is required. So we have the traditional process for risk-based thinking, and in my years of experience, this is honestly true, right? Don't do anything wrong today, don't do anything wrong tomorrow, and then repeat. But now the AS9100 process is really all about managing the risk, right? From when you establish that context of the organization all the way out until you ship products to your customer and any post-delivery services that you offer, right? There's risks throughout that entire process from start to finish, and each part of that entire process has different risks associated with it. That's why it's really a preventative action tool when you use AS9100 and have a robust system and you integrate the AS9145 for the advanced product quality planning. So, like I said, AS9100 makes risk-based thinking a requirement. They're determined so that you can, whether or not you have a requirement from formal method. There is nothing in AS9100 as of right now that says, here's how you have to identify your risks and manage those risks. It just says that you have to do it. So we're going to talk a little bit about how all those are integrated into one and how you can use 9145 to accomplish the requirements in AS9100. And then AS9100 811 is where it specifically talks about operational risk. And we're going to get into that as well. All right, so the first thing is, what is risk? That's what everybody always asks. ISO, all the ISO documents that are out there, I think there's a total of 157 different definitions of risk. Okay. You take away all the risks that are determined for hazards. That leaves probably roughly about 25 to 30 different definitions of risk, right? So, but AS9100 considers it the risk of uncertainty that can prevent or enhance your ability to achieve objectives. But if you think about it, everything we do every day has a risk to it. There's risks of walking down the stairs in your home on your way to work. There's risks driving to work. There's risks while you're at work. There's risks in pretty much everything we do. Now, based on our life experience, we are conditioned, or we've conditioned ourselves to automatically take that risk into account and adjust for it in our brain and make the necessary choices. Right? If you think about it, you run the risk, can I make it all the way to work and back on the gas I have left in my tank, or do I need to stop on the way to work, or do I stop on the way after? Right? So those types of things. But we've learned to mitigate those based on our experiences. So what you need to do in AS9100 is come up with a way to train yourself, your people, your culture, your everything at your organization on how you identify the risks that can happen there, whether it's process related or product related. And also risks can also be an opportunity, not always a bad thing. So why do we need to manage our risks? Risk management is not about stopping the risk. What you're trying to do is understand it, prioritize it, and control it. Okay? Just by definition, there will always be risks, okay? Because there's always the unknown. Risk management provides the transparency to the risk. It identifies and measures that impact, how often it's going to happen, how bad is it going to be. And once you know that, it allows for you to plan your processes and products and your controls around those risks. Risk management also provides the accountability for risk. Helps you make better decisions. It helps show that responsibility, who has the authority to handle those. Okay? And it also helps with the prompt responses so that you can get better outcomes. Okay? Risk management also reduces the risk, using prevention controls as mitigation tools. And risk management helps align with the business strategies. That's the big one. It lets top management focus on those strategic objectives and the strategic direction of your organization. And it really can help your company be more sustainable long-term. Right? So in AS9100, these are the different clauses where risk is talked about. So you have 4.1 when you're talking about risks and opportunities. It has its own section in the very front of the standard. Then you have leadership and commitment, customer focus. And then you have the planning for risks, actions to address risks and opportunities in clause 6. And then you're going to talk about it in management review, of course. And then you have your, during the measurement and monitoring section of the standard, it talks about risks some more. And then also you have to update risks and opportunity based off the corrective action you take from clause 10. In the red box there, you can see all the places in operational risk is talked about in clause 8. Okay, specific to the operations, basically your shop floor processes. Right. So this is a good graphic that shows how the PDCA, the AS9100, and the AS9145 cycle all fit together. Okay. So it starts with AS9145 starts with the voice of the customer, right? Those customer requirements coming in, which falls directly with AS9100 with your context, your organization, 511, which is your customer focus, and 512. And then that feeds into your planning. which is clauses 6, when you're planning your objectives, you're planning your risks and opportunities, you're planning for those. And then clause 7, which is your resources, right? Where you got to plan your time, your money, people, equipment, infrastructure, training and competence. It all feeds into that. And then that feeds directly into the PDCA cycle, which if you look at the planning part of PDCA, it fits perfectly with clauses 8.1 and 8.2, okay, for your operations, which also is tied directly to your AS9145 APQP phase 1, which is the planning phase. Okay. Then you have the doing phase, which is clauses 8.3, 8.4, and 8.5, where you're actually designing the product, you're making the product, and you're checking the product. The easiest way to think about it. That falls directly within phase 2 and phase 3 of APQP, which is your design development phase for the product and your design development phase for your process. And then you have check, right, which is 9.1, monitoring, measuring, and analysis, right, which fits perfectly with APQP phase 4, right, which is where you're going to do your verification and your validation. And then your ACT cycle, your ACT phase, still fits with phase 4 because you take those verification and validation results, you analyze those, and you make any adjustments that are necessary, which tie directly to AS9100 10.2, which is your continual improvement. And then you have all that information and it feeds directly into management review in 9.3. Right? And that's when you're going to discuss all the changes that you made, things that still need to be changed, what were all of our results, how did our processes function, did we meet our KPIs, those type, all that information. And then if you notice, that feeds directly into your clauses 8.5, 8.6, 8.7, and then 10.3, which is your corrective actions, which also fits perfectly with AS9145 APQP phase 5, which is your production phase. So now you're ready for full-on production. So you can kind of see how PDCA, AS9100, and AS9145, they all fit together perfectly. Not a lot of jumbling around, not a lot of missed items. I mean, if you think about it, we pretty much covered the entire AS9100 standard with AS9145 incorporated, which now takes into place so your robust QMS with a definite systematic method for analyzing risks and opportunities for your whole organization, start to finish, and all of your processes in operations should make it so that you can actually achieve 0 defects and reduce that variation in your processes and your product. So some of the common aerospace practices that we already have in place as aerospace suppliers, a lot of this stuff we're already doing. Okay? We're already doing a little bit of a risk assessment and a feasibility review when we do that contract review up front. Okay? And we're already doing supplier analysis when we do our make or buy decisions. Can we use this supplier? Is the customer telling us we have to use this supplier? We need to go find a new supplier because this one's not doing very good. For those that have design, we're already doing a lot of design and development work if you're responsible for design. The only difference is you might not be actually putting it in an actual DFMEA for design risk at the moment. But a little bit of training and you're up to speed on what goes into a design FMEA, and now you're accounting for more of the risks that you may or may not have thought of. Okay? And also for your process manufacturing, most companies already have some sort of a process flow. It's either in a flow chart or a procedure. It's usually documented somewhere on to how things flow from start to finish. All AS9145 does is kind of put that into a systematic, easy to follow manner that's step by step. That obviously helps you identify more risks and opportunities and controls that need to be in place for your actual processes to make sure you're getting good parts every time, all the time. So Most of the time, everybody thinks of risk as the likelihood of occurrence and the severity. Right? How often is it going to happen to me? And if it does happen, how bad is it going to be? And then the next question is, what do we have in place to make it so it won't happen? Or what do we need to put in place? Okay. So the aerospace APQP model, we're going to talk about that a little bit. These are those same 5 phases of APQP that I talked about. Right? You have the planning, product design, process design, validation of the product and processes, and then launch and corrective actions. So the aerospace APQP model, what it's really designed for besides helping you identify all those risks is enhancing your product development process. Whether you are responsible for design or not, you still have to come up with a way to develop that product and those processes for you to make it. So even if you're a build to print shop, you still have to decide, okay, here's how we're going to actually make it. Here's what we need to make it from. You may or may not have to create separate drawings for some of the process steps on your shop floor. And you probably already have some sort of a gate review, even if you're not design responsible. But the aerospace APQP aligns directly with the product development process. It helps you make sure all the activities and actions were done. They all have good quality. Everybody's bought off. Everybody understands exactly what needs to be done and when. So it really helps drive home that effective communication, which is also part of Cloud 7, if you think about it. And it also helps identify any kind of roadblocks or constraints that need to be either moved around or removed, or something needs to be put in place. Okay. So this is kind of what the aerospace APQP model looks like. You have your program needs. You have the 5 phases of the APQP around the outside of the circle. You have your management team making decisions and doing reports, and you have all the stuff in the middle, which is the 5 phases. There's 48 defining elements or activities, and each one has some key deliverables. And we're going to talk about each one of those today as well. And then we're going to also show how it directly ties in with AS9100 and some of the things that I know from my experience in aerospace we're already doing. Okay. And then that feeds into your PPAP, which we're going to talk a little bit about PPAP at the end, which is part of APQP. Really, the best way to look at PPAP, and I'll probably say it again later, is PPAP is the objective evidence that your APQP process worked like it was supposed to. That's really all it is, the objective evidence. Okay. So some of the key characteristics of APQP, which is AS9145, you need to have a cross-functional team, cross-functional management. You've got to have a multidisciplinary approach. You cannot do these things alone in the vacuum. It will not work. It will not turn out very well. Believe me, I've tried the hard way, and yeah, if you follow the guidance and you follow the steps and you follow the training, it works out great. You try and do it on your own in your own way, APQP does not turn out very well. Okay. It is a preventative approach. It does bring better understanding to the requirements, especially the requirements of AS9100. When I've done classes in the past for AS9145, where I've actually gone to suppliers and helped them do their FMEAs, they really they walk away with a better understanding of, oh, well, this is what it meant in AS9100 we were supposed to be doing, which is what you want. And it also helps with those critical design functions and key characteristics and make sure they're flowed down all the way from the customer all the way through the shop floor. We've all probably been in that situation in our own organizations, especially me coming from the quality world. Things would be in shipping in a box, about ready to get loaded on a truck, and somebody'd come running out with an engineering change notice in their hand, wanting to make sure we had incorporated it, and nobody had ever even seen it other than the engineering department. Happens all the time. Okay. So the biggest thing to remember about APQP, and one of the biggest reasons it's important, is prevention's a one-time expense. You're going to spend a little more time and money up front, but detection and correction are forever. What's Aerospace been doing for the last 20, 30 years? Every time a problem happens, what's the first thing we do? We add another inspection step, or we add some sort of bias audit. Which is the first thing to happen. Right? So detection and correction will last forever. If you can prevent things from happening, it's a one-time expense and you shouldn't have to worry about it anymore. Right? So a little bit about AS9145, just so everybody understand. You can see right there, the title is the requirements for advanced product quality planning and production part approval process. Right? This is a standard that is new, fairly new to aerospace. It's been talked about off and on again over the last 20 years in aerospace. You really have. It'll be talked about. It'll go away for a little while. They'll talk about it again. Automotive's been using it for 30, 40 years. They pretty much perfected it, which is good. So we have a lot of knowledge base out there to learn from as well. And aerospace is starting to see more and more individuals and organizations with automotive background. So implementing the standard, that's another reason it's not going to be quite as hard to integrate it as you may think. Because chances are in your organization, you probably have a few people that have had to deal with it before in their automotive past life. Okay. So the intent of AS9145 is an approach used for production realization to ensure that the quality products meet all the customer expectations. And I listed 3 things right there that the customer will always want. These 3 things will never change from your customer. And if you think about it, it's the same 3 things when you go buy something, from a new car to a washer and dryer to a toaster oven, whatever it may be, you're looking for these same 3 things. You want it on time, right? When you're ready to buy it, you're ready to buy it, you want it. Right? When you get it home, it needs to make sure that it has the right fit, form, and function. Does what it's supposed to do, look like it's supposed to. Okay? And then you also want it for the lowest cost possible. Those are the same 3 things your customer is always going to want. Those will never change. So ensuring the common requirements are used at all levels of the supply chain can also help you make sure you're achieving those customer expectations. This is all done through eliminating or reducing the product and process variations. Because at the end of the day, what's our biggest thing? We got to keep the customer happy. So that's what the intent of 9145 is. Now, granted, that's in a brief nutshell, but I don't want to, we could be here for days if we were going through the entire standard piece by piece. But I just wanted to give you a little bit about what the intent is and also what the scope is. So AS9145 takes kind of the requirements of all these different standards and kind of rolls them into one. Okay? So, and you can, they are directly linked. So AS9100, that's your QMS. And the QMS says you have to identify risks and opportunities and actions to mitigate those. Okay? 9102, FAIs. We all know FAI. And the reason I wanted to bring that up importantly is because I remember in my quality past, when AS9102 first came out, there was the most pushback I've ever seen from aerospace suppliers. Nobody wanted to do first articles this way. Everybody was used to doing first articles their own way. Everybody did it differently. And this standardized first articles and how they were done. As soon as Boeing said, everybody, all of our suppliers will meet AS9102 for first articles. That changed the face of aerospace and everybody had to fall in line. That's what I'm saying. The same thing's going to happen with AS9145. Right? So when the 800-pound gorillas at the top, like Boeing, Airbus, Sikorsky, UTC, some of these big players say AS9145 is a requirement, it's going to snowball through the entire aerospace industry. Okay. AS9103 is a standard. It's not a requirement, but it's a standard that talks about how to manage your key characteristics from beginning to end, from when they come in from the customer all the way through shipping, and how to manage those, which is very important with AS9145, is identifying those key characteristics and where they're controlled and what controls are in place to make sure they happen. And then AS9110, this will also fall with them, which everybody knows if you're in aerospace, AS9110 is for the repair and overhaul folks. Like that note at the bottom says, AS9145 are complementary. They're not an alternative to any kind of contract requirements, statutory or regulatory requirements, or a customer requirement requiring AS9100. So AS9145 is not separate. And so don't think you can get either or when it does become auditable. Most likely you're going to have both. All right, so there is some applicability though. And for, I'm not sure who's all, what organization everyone's from here today. But AS9145 is applied to new product development efforts or products that are currently in production where changes are planned, which we all know happens quite a bit. Final product or selected levels of parts. In other words, piece parts that may be part of a larger assembly that you do may have these requirements. It can also be previously approved products. I've done a lot of things with UTC suppliers where they've been making parts for the last 10 years. And UTC decided they wanted to flow these requirements down on specific parts. Okay. The only thing that's really not within the scope or applicability of AS9145 is the commercial off-the-shelf items. And if you think about it, the easiest one to think about is Fastenal, nuts, bolts, screws, that kind of stuff. Commercial off-the-shelf thing. A lot of chemicals like from Dow Corning or DuPont may not be included in this as well, because it's just a commercial off the shelf and you just order in a catalog item. So the majority of those are not going to be applicable unless for some reason a customer specifically requires them. Okay? But as a producer and supplier, if 9145 requirement does flow down to you, excuse me, you are going to be responsible for flowing it down to your supplier. Okay. Especially if a supplier controls a key characteristic that you have identified or your customer has identified, you will need to flow this down to them. Okay. And then again, just some of the objectives of 9145. And like I said, this is 9145. This is a brief nutshell. I mean, we do other webinars and we do other classes and training as far as Omnex goes, specifically related to AS9145. I teach that class as well as a lot of the AS9100 classes. So in fact, I think I have a 9145 class coming up next month. But really, it just specifies requirements for product realization process. And it drives a quality-focused approach. It does have specific deliverables. They are established. You need to monitor them, you need to track them, and it does help identify risks and mitigation actions and who's responsible for them. To be successful, implementing APQP or AS9145, you got to have that management commitment, just like you have to with AS9100. It's got to come from the top down, and it needs to start at the beginning when the customer sends you in requirements. Even if you're doing built to print, you might not have to do the design, the product design and development phase, and you might not have to do all of the planning phase in phase one, but pretty much some of phase 1, 3, 4, and 5, you're still going to be responsible. And the other way to be successful is you need to use a multidisciplinary team for all of these APQP projects. Like I said, doing it in a vacuum by yourself or leaving it to one individual, it's not going to work. Things will get missed. So we're going to talk about the integration part of it now. And I love this little picture. I've had it on my computer for a while. It stems from my military past. The difference is none of us almost joined, right? You can't almost do this integration. It's kind of an unknown deal. If you almost do it, then you'll probably almost be successful. Okay. So I kind of like that, right? Because by the time you're dressed like that and out in the middle of the desert somewhere, yeah, you haven't almost joined anymore. right? So that's why I kind of like it. All right, so AS9145 and AS9100 integration. Okay, so you can see that top line, those 5 boxes. Those are the 5 phases of APQP, which is AS9145. Planning, product design, product and process verification, and then production. Okay. So you can see I put on there the clauses of AS9100 that fall directly with those 5 phases. Okay. So you have 8.1 and 8.2. So you have operational planning and control and the requirements of products and services. Comes straight from AS9100. Your product design and process design, that's 8.3, 8.4, and 8.5. You have, phase 4, which is product and process verification. That's 9.1 for your monitoring and measuring, and your 10.2, which is your corrective action and non-conforming products. A little bit of non-conformances. And then it gets turned over to production, which falls directly with your 8.5. 6, which is your release of products and services. 8.7 is how you control your non-conforming product, and of course, your continual improvement loop. Okay. Now, in AS9100, though, like I said, there is no requirement for a process design process. So on your overall process interaction map that all auditors want to see, right? The big map that has customer on both sides and a lot of little boxes in the middle. You do not have to have a little box that says process design. Okay, it's not a requirement. Now, it is a requirement that you have documented processes, and how you do that is currently up to each organization. AS9145 will actually help you design and develop those processes to make them even better, especially within your production cycle. Okay. So we're going to talk a little bit about each one of these phases real quick and kind of how they relate. Some of the things you're going to see as far as these deliverables on each one. If they are in bold text, it's straight out of AS9145. But you're going to notice a lot of these things under the deliverable section, you're probably already doing as an aerospace supplier. The only difference is you may not have documented it in the APQP manner, but you're probably already doing a lot of them. So like project targets, safety, quality, manufacturability, service life, and reliability. Those are all part of aerospace parts requirements. Right? How many flight hours can it go before we have to change it or do some sort of maintenance on it or pull it off and replace it? Okay? What's our quality requirements? What's our manufacturing requirements? Okay? So the planning phase is where you get all of this information from the customer and you put it all together. I like to think of it as this is kind of the design on the napkin phase. Okay? You kind of know what you want it to do. The customer's telling you. You're kind of just sketching it out on a big cheap tablet with a number 2 pencil type stuff. Right? You're going to have that preliminary list of critical characteristics or key characteristics, a preliminary bill of materials. You might even have a preliminary process flow of how it's going to flow through your shop, maybe. Preliminary sourcing plan, right? You're going to make or buy this stuff. Okay. So that's some of the deliverables. A lot of the things we're already doing. All right. And then there's the product concept is finalized and a pre-design is available. That's the output. Right. So basically like a gate review or a design review. Okay. Whichever way you may call it. Okay. So product design development. Now we're getting into what's the product actually have to look like, smell like, taste like, feel like, what's it supposed to do, those types of things. We're putting all that into account now. We're coming out with a design risk analysis. You're coming out with your design records, could be the drawings, any other kind of 3D modeling. You're coming out with an actual bill of materials, which we already do, right? So a DFMEA is going to help look at different things that are like this, right? Which is one of the requirements in APQP is a design FMEA if you're design responsible. So this is where you're also going to list all those special requirements, key characteristics, Now, these are all product related, you have to remember. Now, we're not on the process side yet. You're going to have a preliminary risk analysis, right? Especially of your sourcing plan, but also of the product risks that can go on, right? You probably, this is where you would determine your packaging spec. Aerospace, a lot of us have packaging told to us by the customer. But you're also going to come up with that design, verification, and validation plan. Aerospace, a lot of us, we like to think of those as our approved test plans, our ATPs, right? And then the feasibility assessment. Can we actually make it? That's the big one. So if you think about it, a lot of these things, again, are things we're already doing. All right, so process design development. This is all about designing your processes on how you're actually going to manufacture and how things are going to flow through the shop. So APQP 9145 specifically lays out some ways to do this. A lot of the information you're already going to have for parts you're already building. You're already going to have work instructions. You're probably already going to have some process flow diagrams. You might have your process turtles. There's a lot of information that you already have. You just need to put it into the APQP format of how things are laid out. Now, a couple of things that are not as big in aerospace as they are in automotive, that you will have to do is like your MSA, your measurement system analysis. A big part of that, your gauge R&R, right? We don't do a lot of MSA in aerospace. We don't do a lot of, we all do calibration, but a lot of our tolerances are so tight on the drawing, we don't really do a capability study because in the past, as long as it's been within the tolerance, every dimension on the prints within the tolerance, it's going to fit, it's going to do what it's supposed to, and the customer's happy. And so there are a few things that you're probably not doing or not doing as well as it probably needs to be done for AS9145. So those kind of things you have to take into account. And each one of these phases has, like I said, that gate review at the end to make sure everything was done, all the deliverables were met. So then you have your product and process validation. This is where you're going to inspect the parts, measure the parts, test the parts, whatever it may be, right? And you're going to come up with that control plan, which really feeds directly into your work instructions, all the controls that you have in place to mitigate risks, control your key characteristics, what equipment you're using, what you're using to measure it. Make sure all that's spelled out. Because if all that's spelled out and everybody's doing it like it says it they're supposed to, you're going to reduce that variation. And also, you notice how one of the deliverables is your first article inspection report, which is your AS9100. So this does not take away your AS9100. It's actually one of the deliverables that you have to do anyway. And since you're already doing it, you just get to include it. And then, of course, you turn it over to production. Okay. Which you notice how one of the deliverables is continuous improvement actions and lessons learned, okay, which ties directly to clause 10 for continual improvement. Okay. So there is a thing out there by APQP called the Supply Chain Management Handbook. You may have heard SCMH. It is a very useful integration tool for integrating these two standards. Parts of it are free, parts of it are not. I'm just going to throw that out there for you. But it's instrumental guidance. It is guidance. The whole SCMH is really there to address continual improvement throughout the entire value stream. Okay? So it is broken into pieces like you can see on here. I kind of took that screenshot straight from their website. You can kind of see there are 7 different parts to it. Is a good way to think about it. But it does cover your value stream from start to finish. Okay. Section 7 is where you're going to find the most help for integrating these two standards. 7.2 is for APQP itself, and 7.3 is all about risk management. Okay. So this is kind of how it's laid out. If you was to pull up 7.2.3 in the APQP manual, it is guidance material straight for 9145. It gives you, an element structure. It's kind of by phases. So this is part of phase 1. It tells you who the element owner is, right? So who would own this part? So this also helps you focus on that cross-functional team using this guidance, because it kind of tells you who's responsible for each part of it. Right? Gives you a little bit about the methodology, what your deliverables are per that element owner for this part of the actual process, the APQP process. It also kind of helps look at your inputs and then any kind of other resources that you may need, right? So it's kind of laid out like this. It is very well structured. It is very well done. It's actually a very useful tool, right? So it is out there for you to use. Besides other training, like I said, that Omnex offers, there are some software packages out there like Omnex has. We're going to talk a little bit about that at the end. Some of the things Omnex actually offers that is centered around this. But it is also a very good integration tool to go to as a companion to all that as well. So why do we do APQP and why do we need to integrate them? What's the big payoff, right? That's what everybody wants to know. What's in it for me? So the biggest thing, or a couple of the biggest things, is it really enhances your design for manufacturing. Right? I've been to a lot of design review meetings in the past as a quality manager and a quality director, and yeah, they don't like quality asking a bunch of questions. Because I'll ask that, well, how are they supposed to actually put this together on the shop floor? Or how are we actually supposed to measure that, right? And a lot of times engineers are like, well, I designed it, you figure the rest out. Okay. But this new AS9145 really helps drive home, including that design for manufacturing, making it easier to manufacture and assemble, right? You can see right there, the goal is to make manufacturing process as simple and efficient as the product's functionality will allow. It also helps drive home that design for better design for assembly. The goal is to enable the assembler to perform their job in the most productive manner possible and reduce the amount of work they must do to the simplest level. And in doing that, it reduces the variation between assemblers or between operators or between technicians. So APQP, like I said, starts with the voice of the customer. And you can see how it flows through design FMEA, your DVP&R, your process flow diagram, and then feeds directly into your process FMEA, your control plan, and straight down to your work instruction. This makes it so everybody in the organization that has anything to do with your product realization process understands all the requirements, and it's very easy to communicate those all the way through. From the person out there running a drill press all the way up to your engineer who talks to the customer every day, and everybody in between. Okay. So it's designed to help that linkage from the voice of the customer all the way through to the person actually doing the work out in the shop floor. Okay. It also helps identify all of your manufacturing risks and how to manage that with your control plan, your inspection worksheets, your gauge control. All that ties together to help manage that risk, because there is a lot of risk in the manufacturing environment. People use the wrong tool to measure something with. People use the wrong equipment to process the parts on. People use the wrong method of transport from one side of the shop to the other. So there's risks in all that. How to manage that and how to control it is the key to all that variation and helping with the zero defect. Okay, so like I said in the beginning, a lot of aerospace suppliers are really halfway there in integrating these two standards together. So if you remember that first slide I showed you with the AS9145 and all 5 phases and the AS9100 and how it ties directly in. What I've included now is how these things are already realized. Okay? You're probably already doing contract review, feasibility, can we make it or not? Getting those customer requirements and creating that preliminary bill of materials. Most organizations are already doing it. It's just not formally documented in a systematic manner like AS9145. Right? For the product design and the process design, sure, you already have drawings of some sort, bill of materials, test plan, process resources, key characteristics, all that's probably identified somewhere. When we get to phase 4, right, we have inspection plans, we have our MSA. May or may not be doing MSA, like I said, that's not as big yet in the aerospace world. It's getting bigger quickly, but it's just not something that we've ever focused on. It was more focused was actually on the calibration of everything. Your measurement results, non-conforming products, functional testing. Okay. And then of course, phase 5, we're on full on production, capability assessments, your continual improvement, packaging and shipping, AS9100 first article. So this is just in red in some of the stuff that you're most likely already doing. What AS9145 does, besides helping identify all those risks that can go wrong and how we control them, it also puts all this information into a nice structured format to be the objective evidence of how the product realization process worked. Okay, because right now you probably have all this stuff in the red, or the majority of it, and it's scattered throughout your organization by various people, various departments, various file folders on the network, hard copies. It's scattered everywhere. What AS9145 does is help you structure all that into one file to make it easy to present as objective evidence, both to an auditor for all those clauses for AS9100. When you have an audit, you have to provide objective evidence for it. Okay? So making it nice and easy really isn't too much of a stretch. I mean, yes, integrating AS9145 is going to be some work, but it's not going to be as much work as when you very first got certified to AS9100, because a lot of this stuff you're already doing. Okay. So production part approval submission, like I said, that's the objective evidence. Okay. So this is the list of elements that are part of the PPAP package, right? Or that objective evidence of 9145. You have design records, you have your design risk, which is usually your design FMEA, your process flow diagram, your PFMEA, which is your process FMEA, control plan, measurement system analysis, process capability study, how well are we doing at making good parts every time, packaging and preservation, labeling, first articles, and then sometimes customers may have some additional PPAP requirements. And then of course, there's a form that you send in with it, and hopefully your customer signs off on that form that it's approved and sends it back to you. And that's how you show that it was approved, right? So this is actually in AS9145. It shows you exactly what needs to be done and when. You may use the form that's included, or you can use a different form, that approval form. You can use an equivalent. It just has to have all the same information on it. But like I said, it's the objective evidence. It's how you show your customers that, yes, we have the capability to produce good parts on time every time, with as least variation as possible. That's what you're shooting. Okay. So APQP, PPAP, your QMS. Okay. So implementation best in class. It's integrated with your product design or your product development process and the AS9100 requirements. It is a structured process. It has clearly defined tasks, clearly defined deliverables and responsibilities. It does help with those gate reviews. And the big thing for the gate reviews is that's that driver for the communication, that everybody understands what was done and what still needs to be done. Not just a, meeting to say, oh, here's your next set of action items. Get to them when you can. Right? It's more than that. It does give you that simultaneous engineering between the design process and the process, the manufacturing process. And one of the big things is it really drives home the key characteristics like being identified and the critical items from start to finish so that nothing gets missed. There is software for APQP and PPAP management, and the FMEAs, control plans, all that stuff. There are software packages out there. We're going to talk a little bit about Omnex's package towards the end. Aerospace does address the risks in your product development process. We talked about that. It helps insurance. So it says Aerospace APQP must be integrated throughout your PDP process. That's out of 9145. So we talked about those 3 key requirements or the key things you're going to get out of it. Make sure all your activities are done and completed on time and all the deliverables met. Drives that effective communication, and it helps reduce the amount of roadblocks or eliminates the roadblocks. Okay. Now, you are going to get some potential pushback to organizations. I know from experience, right? Oh, well, the forms and stuff are too time consuming. It's going to take us forever to do all these. What's the point? Right? Or we don't understand how to do a feasibility. My favorite one, manufacturing quality, they don't need to be part of the quote. Why do we need to talk to them? Or quality production and purchasing ask too many questions, right? So, and then the big one down there towards the bottom, can we charge this back to the customer, right? Everybody remembers back to 9102, everybody tried to do that when that first came out too. It didn't work out so well. Chances are this isn't going to either. And then the big one that's always going to happen, well, it's going to take too long. We told the customer we would ship it next month. So these are just some things that you're going to get some pushback. So we try to integrate these are some things that are going to come up. It happens everywhere. It's not meant to be derogatory or anything else. It's just a, just be aware. The pushback's going to be there. It's something new. It's a change, and not all aerospace organizations love change. Okay, so just a little bit of a summary. It can improve your overall quality. It can reduce your PPM levels from in the thousands or your scrap percentage from being high down to that industry standard of 2% or less in just a few years. It does have the gate reviews, tools, within APQP, your design FMEA, your process FMEA, your MSA. It's all going to help reduce the risks and improve the quality of your parts. Your teams are going to need some training in FMEA control plans, SPC, MSA, those types of things. If they don't have that competency already, it's going to be a little bit harder to have a successful integration and a successful understanding. And of course, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the software tools like Omnex's QMS or EWQMS. We do have APQP software as well. So there are tools out there to help you do it rather than doing everything in an Excel file type stuff. So just some different ways Omnex can help. I like to think of this as the message from our sponsor, right? So Omnex is not only a training company. We do have some of the best-in-class approaches for implementing integration, software platforms. We really do. We've had a lot of customers that we've helped in various industries, manufacturing environments, different standards, different product lines. We are at the forefront of all the latest standards and strategies. We do have members of Omnex that are part of the committees that write some of these standards. We are the first organization to develop a specific artificial intelligence PPAP review software. We offer on-site and virtual consulting and implementation as well as training. The way the world is now, most of my training classes are virtual. A few are still on site. I know some people have put in some chat and some questions. We will get to those here shortly. Just based on aerospace industry needs, These are some of the recommendations that we have from Omnex to put in best in class, right? Process, approach, and documentation. Disciplined management and driving that commitment from the top down. AS9145 for new product development, including the process controls. AS9115 for those that have deliverable software as part of their products. Lean implementation, problem solving, e-processes, and then risk-based supplier management. So these are just some of the systems that we also have. You can see some of the digitalization of quality, some of the software that we have, enterprise quality. We have enterprise APQP solution, quality management. We do have things like Doc Pro for document control. And it does help. You can see over there compliance. It does pretty much list all of the major standards that organizations are certified to. And we do have the enterprise APQP and PPAP solution, which is a software package that handles pretty much all of the stuff required in AS9145. Your documents can be uploaded into it. Your supplier's documents can be uploaded into it. Changes can be made, different things like that. It makes it really easy to submit a file to the customer, those types of things. And if you are interested in learning more about the software, feel free to reach out after this as well. And then some of the folks that actually make the software can talk to you. I know enough about the software to be dangerous. I know it works. I've seen it in action. I've helped implement it. How it's actually made, that's the part I don't. We do have enterprise-wide quality, like I talked about. Aqua Pro for auditing, Audit Pro. We have Problem Solver, MSA, Doc Pro for documentation or document control, HR Pro for training requirements, APQP and PPAP Manager that we just showed on the last screen. So there are a variety of different packages out there as well. You can pretty much meet the needs of anybody that needs something. We do have virtual and remote training available as well. Everybody's probably knows this already. We do a lot of virtual classroom type stuff, which is good because we can do it from anywhere as long as there's good access. So just some of the training that's coming up real quick. I just want to make sure I went through this because some of it applies. We do have some classes in AS9100 and AS9145 in December, January, and February coming up, as well as some APQP, some an understanding class as well. So if you want to know more, you can reach out to omnex.com. Look at the full training schedule through 2021. These are just some other courses that are offered. Some things about PlanTech. Again, a little bit more about PlanTech and some of the things we offer. Like I said, I am over PlanTech. So a lot of it is the auditing, the PPAP, APQP stuff, and then our staffing. That's the big three that we do. And then questions. So let me pull these up because I know we've had a few. The first one, where does the SAE AS6500 for manufacturing management program fit into this landscape? It kind of ties directly into it as far as it doesn't specifically reference the AS9145, but a lot of the features are pretty much the same between the two standards. So you can implement AS9145 and probably cover, I would say, roughly 85% of the AS6500. So there's a few other things you might have to additionally do. And then the next one, what about Lean APQP or Scrum APQP? The biggest challenge to implement was to justify time of plan and execution. That is true. What I recommend to a lot of companies that are just starting out as far as to implement AS9145 and to integrate is try to start with a product that you're about to come out with, or one that's fairly new to production, and take a crack at it that way, because you can always make changes to it. You're going to need a guinea pig in all this. There is some time and some planning that has to go into it. But like I said, a lot of the things you're already doing. It's just a matter of documenting them in the AS9145 form. So I do know that we do have some Omnex folks that specifically deal with like Scrum APQP and Agile APQP. I can have them reach out to you, the person that asked that question, and they might be able to explain it a little bit more for the Agile APQP side of things. I know there was a few more. Okay. Okay, I think that is all the questions. The other ones were more directed at the formatting, but I think that we handled all the questions. Is there any more questions? Feel free to type them in. Okay, so the last one I just got is AS9145 mandatory, as it depends on the customer flow down. Currently, it is only by customer flow down. There are a few customers out there that I know for sure are flowing a version of AS9145 down. I know Parker Hannafin's working on it right now, actually. So is Lockheed. UTC flows a version of this down to some of their suppliers. Airbus flows a version of this down. So a lot of the OEMs are flowing a version or 9145 down to their suppliers, but not everybody, and it's not specifically mandatory for all of aerospace yet, like AS9100 did, which came out, and then it took a couple of years, and then everybody's like, yes. Could you please explain how AS9100 8.5 is within phase 3 of the APQP? Part of your phase 5 is your monitoring, measuring, analysis. Just a sec, I want to. On my other screen, I'm pulling up the standard here real quick, just so I don't want to say anything wrong. So, second. Okay, here we go. So for your production and service provisions, right? So how you're controlling all that, that's phase 3 is where you are designing your process FMEA, right? So the process steps that you're going to use to actually make your products, right? Which is specifically what 8.5 is all about, right? You need to have the characteristics of the product to be produced, the services to be provided, how you're going to control all that, the availability of use and suitability of monitoring and measuring. So the different parts of how you're going to actually make the product, you need to make sure that is designed into your process, which is phase 3, because phase 3 is your process development phase. Okay, so hopefully that answered that. It's also where you come up with your criteria, what's going to be looked at. You'll notice if you look at, I want to get the right thing here. So if you look at 851G, it even talks about the implementations and actions to prevent human error, right? So you need to account for those as part of your process design. So there are some parts that specifically fit into phase 3, which fixtures you use, jigs you use, equipment you use, those types of things. All right. I'm not sure I missed one. Let me go real quick. Okay, so somebody said, I read that PPAP submission is not the same as automotive in terms of the amount requirements. Yes, there are I believe automotive has 19 elements that may or may not be required on the PPAP, depending on what level of PPAP you have to submit in automotive. They have levels 1 through 5. There are different elements that are required for each one of those submittals. Aerospace has gone to 11 elements, and there are no different levels. They are the same elements each time. Your customer may add more requirements to it. That's why if you look at number 10 on the list, it was actually customer specific PPAP requirements, right? So they may have additional requirements that they want you to submit, different things like that. So there is less, yes. All right, I think I got everybody's questions answered. I haven't seen any more pop up. I do want to say thank you for those that joined us today. I know you had to take about an hour, a little over an hour. I apologize for going a little bit over, but I appreciate you for being here, taking time out of your day, out of your schedule. There's one more. All right, so, but I do appreciate you for being here. I know some places it's in the evening, some places in the afternoon. Hopefully I may see some of you again in the class down the road, or another webinar, or some of my articles that I put together. Again, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Hopefully you got some value out of it, and we will see you next time. Thank you, everybody.